We'll roll call in a minute here, just getting logged on.
And Mr. Chair, if I could just bring to your attention that item 6.5 shows that there's a presentation available. The presentation is actually on item 6.6.
Thanks for flagging that. Okay, let's come to order for the February 11th Audit Committee meeting. I'll start with a roll call here of committee members, starting with Vice Chair Knack. Are you there?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Councillor Essinger.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Cartmel.
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Good afternoon.
Present in person. Councillor Burrow, Committee Member Burrows, Mr. Burrows.
Good afternoon. I'm here.
Good afternoon. And Mr. Edmondson.
I'm here. Good afternoon.
Super. That's full attendance. Do we have any other members of council joining us from beyond the committee? Please say hello. I see Councillor Walters there. Anyone else?
Hello, everybody.
All right. I need a motion to adopt the agenda with a couple of replacement pages on item 6.1. Councillor Knack.
Yes, sorry, I'm used to Councillor Essinger doing it. I'll move the adoption of the agenda with the following change: replacement pages for item 6.1, Office of the City Auditor Recommendation Follow-up Dashboard Report, Attachment 1, and the Council Report.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot that Councillor Essinger was actually on this committee and not a guest today. Apologies. Okay, well, we'll take that motion and vote to approve the agenda with those changes.
We have all the votes, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Display the vote. Carried unanimously. Okay, the minutes. Councillor Essinger, would you like to move the minutes?
Certainly, I'm happy to move the minutes of November 17th, 2020 Audit Committee and the January 7th, 2021 Special Audit Committee minutes.
Please vote.
Sorry, there's like the tiniest typo I just needed to flag.
Of course there is. Well, good thing someone else moved them then. You can make an amendment. Councillor Knack, any questions, concerns, errors, or omissions?
I don't even think it's just in the November 17th minutes under the adoption of the agenda, it has the wrong date. The year is not correct, but it's just an added number, so I don't think it actually needs amendment, just needed to flag it.
And thank you, Councillor Knack. We'll correct that and make sure that that's done before we post the minutes.
Yep, that's in the clerical range, so clerks can easily handle that, but thanks for noting it. If there's nothing further, please vote on the approval of this set of minutes, pair of minutes.
And we're good to go, Mr. Chair.
Display the vote. Carried. All right, I don't think we have any protocol items, so we will select items for debate. Go ahead and click in. It's not, I was looking at my screen where it's not coming up, but I see Councillor Essinger has clicked in. Go ahead.
I would select items 6.3, 6.4, 6.5, and 6.6.
Thank you, Councillor Essinger. Councillor Knack.
Just quickly on 6162, please.
Thank you. And Councillor Nicol, what you were looking for is selected? Okay. So just double checking, no takers on 9.1 or 6768, the cloud computing items?
I'll move the balance when ready.
Thank you, Councillor Nicol. Please vote on those items not selected for debate today.
Mr. Chair, I vote yes, even though I have some technical issues right now.
Understood. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair, your vote, please.
Did it not submit?
No.
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
Display the vote, please. That's carried unanimously. You want to just confirm what committee's taken care of, Mr. Clerk?
Yes, thank you. Today, Audit Committee has passed the recommendations in the following reports without debate. Item 6.7, Cloud Computing Audit. 6.8, Administration Response to the Cloud Computing Audit. And 9.1, External Auditor Non-Audit Services Request.
That's what I have as well. We have no requests to speak or requests for time specific, so we'll go in order. But first, I'll see if there are any councillor inquiries. Not hearing any. Let's start with the dashboard item. I think we can go straight to questions on that, Councillor Knack. And I notice Councillor Henderson has joined us as well. Good afternoon. Any other members of council joined us since? No? Okay. Councillor Knack with questions on the dashboard.
Yes, two very quick questions, and I just want to make sure I confirm the replacement page we added when we approved the agenda included the removal of the Africa Center recommendation, and I assume that's because it's now complete. But I just thought I should ask that out loud because that one had been outstanding for some time.
Councillor Knack, first of all, I'd like to welcome the new city manager to his first audit committee meeting. I think he'll soon find out that it's probably the most interesting committee and his favorite committee.
That is uncharacteristically biased of you, Mr. Ewan.
Total objectivity. So Councillor Knack, yes, actually we have audit management software that we have electronic working papers and our recommendation follow-up process, and with the remote working from home, sometimes it doesn't get updated, so that was essentially on my part that wasn't closed, but it is clearly been closed.
Perfect. Which then led me into the other longer outstanding one, the Edmonton Transit Service recommendation 5, which was scheduled to end January 31st, and that one we didn't have a replacement page added, so I just wanted to double check if that one is done, but for whatever reason it didn't get added to the replacement pages.
No, Councillor Knack, that one is still outstanding, and in the past week we've had some correspondence with Transit, so we're working with them in terms of when we'll be able to close that recommendation.
Okay, so we don't have a set date yet, but we didn't hit that particular one. Okay, I just wanted to double check. Those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor. I can move the reports that we received them for information.
I don't see anyone else clicked in with questions, but certainly I'll take the motion and then double check. If there's nothing further on this, then thanks for double checking that as well. Please vote on receipt of information of the dashboard reports 6.1 and 6.2.
Again, I vote yes.
Thank you, Mr. Edmondson. Display the vote, please.
We need your vote. Thank you.
It's not coming up. I may have to log out, log back in.
And we have all the votes.
Display the vote. Carried. All right, snow and ice control. For once, we're actually talking about it while it's winter, which is a kind of refreshing. Mr. Ewan, go ahead.
Yes, actually very refreshing the past week. I want to start off by thanking Mr. Sebrick and Mr. Simpson and their staff for their cooperation throughout this audit, especially with the added stress and workload they had to balance because of the circumstances leading up to the audit. The City of Edmonton Infrastructure Operations Business Area, operating under the Parks and Roads Services branch within City Operations Department, is tasked with maintaining Edmonton's roads and pathways by providing snow removal and ice control services. Snow removal and ice control is an important and necessary winter activity for all municipalities in Canada. And being one of the more northerly cities in the world, Edmonton can have significant snowfall for at least 6 months of the year. An effective and efficient snow and ice control program is necessary to allow Edmontonians to function under normal winter weather conditions, to reduce snow and ice hazards, and to provide reasonable winter mobility on Edmonton's roadways, in parking lots, and on sidewalks and pathways. In the 2019-2020 winter season, infrastructure operations maintained approximately 11,833 lane kilometers of roads, 1,447 kilometers of sidewalks, 38 kilometers of bicycle paths, and 5,896 bus stops. It is important that city roads and pathways are clear of snow and ice on a timely basis, as failure to do so will impact the safety of city residents. Likely, there have been some moments that every city council member have heard from citizens regarding not meeting the public's expectations for keeping roads and sidewalks clear of snow and ice. Commuters, businesses, and residents rely on this very important service. In response to how important this service is to Edmontonians and to an anonymous letter that was provided to City Council outlining a number of concerns with the current snow and ice control program, the Office of the City Auditor plowed our way through a value for money audit of the city's snow and ice control program. For winter cities, the intent of the snow and ice control program is to minimize economic loss to the community, reduce the inconvenience and hazards of winter conditions for motorists, cyclists, and pedestrians, and facilitate the operation of public transit and emergency services vehicles. Snow and ice control activities should provide reasonable winter driving conditions for vehicles that are properly equipped for winter driving and are operated in a manner consistent with good winter driving habits. As the Parks and Road Services branch continues to strengthen the snow and ice control program to provide quality service to Edmontonians and meet service level expectations, this review identified obstacles and opportunities for management to consider as they strengthen their governance structure, improve program delivery, and manage public expectations. The importance of organization, preparedness, and communications for the success of a winter maintenance program is highlighted in our audit report. We have provided 12 recommendations that can support Parks and Road Services branch to improve the city's snow and ice control program and ultimately to help to ensure the safe and efficient movement of people, goods, and services throughout the city. Mr. Sebrick and Mr. Simpson will now summarize how they are addressing the recommendations in our report, and thank you.
So we'll cross-reference these, of course. We'll get the admin presentation. And then questions of both.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, committee members, members of council. With me today is Brian Simpson, our branch manager of Parks and Road Services, and joining us on the hangout are Phil Harrod, our Director of Infrastructure Operations, as well as Andrew Grant, our General Supervisor of Field Operations. We also have Katrin Owen, our Deputy City Manager of Communications and Engagement, as well as Ms. Bonnie Andrejchuk, our City Solicitor, and they're on the call to answer any questions that you may have of them. We're here today to discuss administration's response to the snow and ice control audit. We'd like to start by thanking the City Auditor and his staff for their collective, collaborative, and professional review of the snow and ice control program. We have accepted all 12 of the recommendations made in this audit. While work was already underway on some of the recommendations prior to and during the audit process, we have also initiated work to implement changes that are identified in the final report. I would also like to emphasize that for completion dates that are identified for 2022, the plan will be to begin the work and implement activities along the way to ensure improvements are continuous and timely. Beyond these recommendations, we are also looking at other ways to continuously improve our program and engage and empower our communities. With that, we'd like to pass it over to Mr. Simpson to go through some of the details of the responses to the recommendations.
Good day. Thank you, Gord. We accept all the 12 recommendations and their associated timelines. 8 of the recommendations will be completed by the end of this year, and the remaining 4 will be completed by the end of 2022. I will take you through each recommendation and highlight some of the work already underway. Change the slide, please. Recommendation 1 aligns with our ongoing discussions with Council and the public. The snow and ice control policy has been adjusted multiple times over the past decade with the goal of keeping up to date with changing practices, technologies, weather patterns, and service level expectations. A refreshed policy we brought forward late spring for the Council's consideration and will be designed using the new model for policy and governance. Recommendation 2. The updated policy will be accompanied by a review of the Snow and Ice Controls Program service design and decision-making models. This includes clarifying parameters for operational practices and identifying levers available for employees to make real-time decisions. This also means leveraging technology wherever possible, like the recent adaptation of an operational decision support system that provides road maintenance recommendations based on weather and local road conditions. Recommendation 3. We know that change management is critical, and we're working to develop and implement efficient change management process that support the 24/7 operations of the Snow and Ice Control Program. Recently, we took a change management approach to the new shift structure for crews, including town halls and senior management and surveys in this process. This was done during it, and this is an area that we need to work on. Processes, tools, and techniques from corporate initiatives such as Reimagine will also be integrated in this work where appropriate. To ensure that we approach this thoughtful work, we expect to be completed by Q3 of 2022. Recommendation 4. A substantial amount of work has been completed to identify and capture data for both metrics and performance measures. This work will be integrated into a performance measurement framework for the Snow and Ice Control Program and will be aligned with the enterprise performance measurement technology solutions that are being developed to support data-driven decision-making for staff, management, and leadership. Next slide, please. Recommendation 5. At a program level, in the past, jurisdictional scans have been conducted to compare Edmonton's winter's maintenance practices with other winter cities and industry best practices. Work is underway with the Snow and Ice Control Program to identify possible measures and formalize them as we prepare for the introduction of a corporate benchmarking program. Work is already underway at the corporate level to determine which benchmarking organizations the city will align with. Recommendation 6. This cost analysis will be coordinated with the ongoing work related to service reviews, priority-based budgeting, and any direction provided by the Reimagine procurement and contracting requirements or limitations that may impact the scope or timelines of this recommendation. Recommendation 7. Work is ongoing to deepen the partnership between the Snow and Ice Control Program and Fleet Maintenance Services. They are a key partner in ensuring a safe and livable winter mobility network for all, regardless of the mode of travel. A longer timeline is required to ensure that fleet support equipment is backed by a service level that supports the outcomes of the Snow and Ice Control Program. Recommendation 8. Cost reduction and revenue generation analysis will be conducted in coordination with Reimagine and will occur over a longer period of time. A pilot is currently underway with 2 neighboring municipalities for tipping fees at the snow storage sites. This pilot will be evaluated at the end of the winter season. In addition, a review of the Community Sandbox program is underway. This review will focus on developing a framework for the best support for the program moving forward and will be part of the policy discussions informed by public feedback. Next slide, please. Recommendation 9. Work is actively underway to expand the standard operating procedures. This will be developed, validated, and communicated to staff in time to support the 2021-2022 winter season. Recommendation 10. Working in conjunction with employee services, we will develop processes, methods, and tools to improve our people leaders' ability to oversee staff. We will ensure that they have support and training required to do this effectively. This work will not be rushed to ensure that it is done in a thoughtful way that supports everyone involved and is expected to be completed by Q3 of 2022. Recommendation 11. Substantial work has been completed already to improve our public communication. Completed items such as a tailored messaging approach to specific platforms such as media, Facebook, Twitter, a full refresh of the website, a redesigned and always interactive on-time map, a parking ban information postcard that was mailed out to all residents. We will conduct a review at the end of this winter and adjust based on what we hear and learn from the community. Finally, recommendation 12. Complaint handling is an important multifaceted process for the snow and ice control program. We're working closely with our partners in 311 to conduct a full review and refresh of scripts for agents. This work includes ensuring the service requests are routed to the right teams. Work is also underway to enhance the council-based inquiry process within the snow and ice control program and the Parks and Road Services branch as a whole. Finally, the city is moving forward with changes and enhancements to the snow and ice control program. Our focus is always to maintain a safe and livable winter mobility network for all, regardless of how they choose to travel. The snow and ice control program is successful as a result of hundreds of hardworking, dedicated, I might add passionate staff that provide core service to every resident, as well as supported from the public. As we move forward this winter, we will continue to be agile as we adapt and apply the lessons that we have learned. Edmonton is making big city moves, and the snow and ice control program plays a critical role in achieving many of the goals and outcomes of the new city plan. A strong winter maintenance program will be at the heart of creating a community of communities that where Edmontons are connected to each other by safe, accessible, and active transportation network. Thank you for listening and for this opportunity, and I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you for both presentations. I'll start with Councillor Essinger, having selected this, and we'll open the speakers list. Councillor Essinger.
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you to those who deliver the snow removal services. Weeks like this remind us how important that service is. And I appreciate that it's challenging, but I'm going to have some really specific questions. I have to say, overall, I was disappointed in what I had heard. But first of all, if I turn to page 33 of the audit report, I'm a little confused because it says that in 2009, the audit suggested that we perform our own versus hire analysis. Again, in 2016, it was advised by consultants, and then it's the same recommendation going forward. So what happened?
So, Councillor Essinger, very good question. So in 2009, you're correct, that was our audit. And at the time, we would have closed it because there would have been enough evidence to indicate that the process was taking place. The 2016 was not our audit. That was actually part of the program and service level review, and that was conducted by, I believe, KPMG. And they also made a similar recommendation. So in terms of why it wasn't completed, there has been, as you can see, a number of reorganization changes, and that's why we thought it was important to highlight it again.
Thank you. And I guess my next question is regarding the snowpack, and I'm looking on page 46 of the audit report. And I guess maybe help me understand, the policy states 5 centimeters of snowpack and will clear neighborhoods, but it was met on January 28th, but if I understand correctly, nothing happened until February 12th. So was this a communication error or a measurement error?
Councillor, in relation to the timing of that, the process when we're doing residential is a contracted process. So there is a process of getting the contracts in relation to doing the residential piece. I can only make an assumption on the time delay. I don't know, Andy, if you have any more to add to that process?
Yeah, that was around the time where we were looking at the residential snowpack and looking for a consistent overage of the 5 centimeters in order to give us the ability to blade those residential areas to maintain that snowpack. If I'm not mistaken, that was right around the time of the cold snap, and then we saw the massive temperature swing, which resulted in a lot of oatmeal. So we decided to send those crews into the residential areas.
So if I read it correctly, you're looking at in the future, looking at it rather than the whole city getting to 8 to 5 centimeters, maybe looking at on zones. Is that what I'm reading here?
I think the approach that we're looking at taking, and we've been exercising this year to a certain degree, is just having a more consistent approach in those residential areas and doing more of a maintenance blading cycles through those areas to try to control those ruts and keep those driving surfaces smoother, just to allow better movement throughout those residential areas. So using that 5 centimeter snowpack as a guideline, but also just putting more presence of our trucks in the residential areas.
Okay, and I appreciate that's how it's working, but when, I supported 5 centimeters, I thought it would ought to be automatically when an area hit that. So I think it's communication is another challenge because people think that too.
And Councillor Esslinger, and you're right about the communication, and this is one of the reasons for the recommendation. There isn't complete understanding whether it is citywide or 1 or 2 or 3 districts out of the 5, so that's why we made the recommendation under to try to make sure that they have clear understanding and consistency of that policy. And I think as the administration brings forward the new policy in the spring, it's those type of questions, excellent questions that you're asking, that needs to be clear, and so that the public and city council members and all your constituents understand.
Thank you. It looks like I'm out of town and I'll need a second, or out of time, I'll need a second round.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. And I have a number of questions, and I'd like to start with the city auditor first. So on page 1, you start stating the audit objectives. On February 13th, 2020, City Council received an anonymous letter which included a number of allegations of mismanagement of the city's snow and ice control program. In response to these concerns raised in the letter, the Office of the City Auditor decided to conduct a value-for-money audit of the city's snow and ice control program. I would think, Mr. Ewan, the first question I want to ask is, it's not common for you to get letters with 22 employees. Was it 22 employees who signed off on that letter? Or that was, we can't confirm if it was 1 or 22, can we?
No, we can't confirm how many in this case. I think you're thinking of another letter that was actually 23 employees.
So why would you conduct this audit then, given that letter? Is it different than the other whistleblower kind of letters that you get?
Councillor Nicol, I guess, as I tried to indicate in my introductory remarks, snow and ice is obviously a very important service. It's one that numerous stakeholders, whether you take the bus, whether you ride a bike, whether you ride a car, it's absolutely essential for the economy of the city. And when you have a number of stakeholders and city employees that come forward to raise it and also send a letter to the city council, we thought it was important that we conduct the audit.
Well, I'll draw your attention, and I'm kind of going to get right to the heart of the matter here. On page 68, between 2015 and 2020, you've itemized out 9 leadership changes, 3 policy/bylaw changes, 6 organizational structure changes, and 7 operational changes. Do you think that this probably was a contributing factor to these concerns being raised?
Yes, and that is also one of the main reasons that we have a recommendation around proper change management practices and better communication with all employees.
So in terms of the employee and management engagement, could you give me kind of the breadths and scopes of the people you talk to down at the department level?
We actually talked to, I believe, 32 union employees. So we did try to talk to as many individuals as possible, plus we talked to the local 30 leaders. So we did try to talk to the members to get and hear their concerns.
So after those interviews and after you've conducted this audit, could you describe to me how you would find the state of affairs of this department?
Well, Councillor Nico, we have made 12 recommendations to help improve the program. I can say that in dealing with all the directors and Mr. Simpson and Mr. Sebrick, there is a clear desire to make sure that the City of Edmonton has a robust and efficient and effective snow and ice control program. And I believe that through the recommendations and through their ongoing work that the City of Edmonton will end up having a snow and ice control program that they can be proud of. Obviously, there has been challenges and why the audit took place, and I think you see from the number of recommendations that this program will be, for lack of a better word, reworked and will be improved upon.
Can you give me your opinion as to why we've had so many leadership changes within the scope of this department and so on? What was the driving impetus behind, quite literally, and I've read it out to you on page 68, the leadership changes, policy, bylaws, obviously that's driven by council, the organizational structures and operational changes?
That question's probably better suited for the administration.
Okay, that's certainly not a problem. So on page 22, 23, and 24, you state, and this is, I'm talking over the past 5 years, we do not have sufficient reliable information in terms of our KPIs and our performance metrics. So what kind of metrics were you looking for? What kind of performance measures were you looking for that you would deem necessary or adequate for the department to be reporting? And I'll come back on a second round. Okay.
Councillor Knack?
You've got to answer the question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, hold on. There may be an answer forthcoming still.
Oh, perfect. Go.
Sorry, there are a number of measures that a number of municipalities have included in their snow and ice control program, and what the purpose of this recommendation is to look outside, and it's kind of similar to what we talked about with our productivity audit, that when you compare yourself to others, you can improve your performance. So we believe that that this area plus all the corporation needs to do that, and we have provided them with some examples of potential measures that they can incorporate.
Thank you. Councillor Knack, you may begin now.
Sure. Thank you. First, and I think the admin presentation suggests differently, but and this may seem minor, but the recommendation due dates for a number of the recommendations in this year are December 31st, but I saw in the presentation it said Q4, and I'm just, being that winter can hit us earlier than December 31st, I was just wondering if those ones we're actually going to be targeting an October 31st completion date.
Councillor, you're absolutely right. We are attempting to get the majority of the 2021 recommendations completed for the upcoming 2021-2022 winter season. That is the intent. I think the way that we do report them is by queues, so that if it is October, that would be Q4. So the intent, though, is to try and have everything ready for this upcoming winter season.
Okay, good. Yeah, I just think we might want to have that clearly reflected versus just because we usually have a hard date and it's not typically, at least in the follow-up report. So we can deal with that later. Recommendation 2 talks about a feedback loop for staff between management and leadership, and I wasn't quite sure I understood what that feedback loop looked like in your mind. And then more specifically, so first elaborate on that. Actually, why don't we start with that? Can you elaborate a little bit on that feedback loop?
I think the big key here, and that's been very evident to myself, and if you talk to Phil Harrott or Andrew Grant relative to our employees, the opportunity to have a conversation and more importantly listen to what their perceptions and their concerns are relative to how the program is going is proven to be a key component. And if you look back historically, that was part of the issues that they identified as not being part of that conversation to the degree they wanted to be. So we put some genuine effort, and we continue to put genuine effort into having meetings, but when I say meetings, I want to say more on an informal level. I know that Phil and Andy are out in the yards regularly, often at 4 o'clock in the morning, meeting with the shift changes to just be available and to have the conversations with our crews and also update them what's happening organizationally. Because as you can appreciate, a lot of these individuals do not have access to email during their regular work shifts, so it's a good opportunity to just keep them in tune with what's happening across the corporation. The other piece is just being available and listening to what those concerns are. And there's a lot of good information, a lot of experience, and I made the comment, a lot of passion. These individuals, a large part, care about the job they do. They care about this city. So just having an opportunity to capture that feedback, capture those issues and questions, and go forward. And as I've said a couple of times, I said, we may not agree, but at least you've been heard, I've been heard, and from there we can make an informed decision going forward as a process in terms of how we do this program. It's a lot of energy, but I can tell you it's a necessary energy in terms of the scope and magnitude of the program and the number of employees involved. But we are seeing some dividends from that, but we do have some work to do.
Okay. The follow-up on that is, being that we do have a policy revision coming up in the spring, will the feedback of our frontline staff be gathered to help inform any additional changes to that policy and to make sure that there is that buy-in? Because I know that was talked about throughout the audit.
Councillor, I think two things will happen with that feedback. It will also help to inform the policy, which will be, again, a high-level document that outlines council's direction. But their feedback will also support some of the administrative procedures that will accompany and support the policy. So definitely those pieces will be integral parts in what we bring back to council in the spring. But I think the other part, and just continuing on from what Mr. Simpson alluded to, is that the pieces that we do include that are from feedback from employees, we want to reconnect with them so that they see where their input actually has formed the plan going forward.
Okay, great.
Just to add a piece of that too, I think it's just important to explain to our employees the why of what's been done, the rationale behind what that policy does ultimately look like, and to just be prepared to explain to them individually, if necessary, the rationale.
Great. Probably not enough not enough time for my next series. I'll just come back for a second round, Mr. Mayor.
Gotcha. Councillor Carmel?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for the report. A few questions, first of all, just on some of the details. And I'm first of all looking at page 31, where it says here that effectively there's a chart that talks about population and boundaries and kilometers all going up, but the budget actually going down. So first question, is that true that the budget has not remained constant, but it's actually been reduced over between 2015 and 2020?
Councillor Carmel, so that chart is showing that technically, when you look at the increase in population, the greater amount of roads that need to be cleared and sidewalks because of the growing city, Yeah, you're right, and the budget hasn't kept up to that, and it has gone down slightly as well.
Just in gross dollars, not inflated dollars, just simply,
Yes.
yeah. And this is comparing 2015 to 2020, but I note on page 17, that chart indicates that in 2016, the roadway maintenance and park operations group were put together. So is that budget comparison that goes back to 2015, is that taking the roadway maintenance budget plus the park operations budget, or is it somehow being held discrete? I just want to be really clear that we're talking about the same dollars doing the same things.
Yes, it would be basically taking into account the snow and ice control operations, no matter where they were.
Okay, just the snow and ice dollars. All right, thank you. Now on
And
page...
we made sure that we did the calculations to ensure that it was a proper comparison.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Ewan, it's been a bit of a tough day. Let me be clear with my question. We're not including any grass cutting or other park dollars in these numbers. This is apples snow clearing dollars right the way through.
Yes, you're correct.
Right, okay, thank you. Sorry for my lack of clarity there. And then, so we have the same dollars, we're doing the same work, but the number of resources have gone down significantly. I'm looking for that chart. I believe the metric was 56 full-time equivalents reduced in the work for snow and ice. Have I got that number correctly?
I
Is 56.4 is the actual number?
Yes. Thank you.
So same dollars spent, but less people employed. Is that simply salary increases and the like?
Councillor, that would be the overall program spend, so it would include anything to accommodate outsourcing or equipment or all of those aspects, so not just FTEs.
Well, it says the labor pool was reduced by 56.4 FTEs, a decrease of 28 actual permanent frontline employees from 2018 to 2020. So that sounds like less people.
Correct, there's less people.
For the same money. And so if I go to the chart on page 7, that breaks down the 2019 budget by category: snow removal, sanding, plowing, etc. Do we have similar numbers and a similar breakdown for 2016 or 2015? We sort of interchange what year we go back to as by way of comparison, 2015 or 16. I guess what I'm interested in is, have we moved a lot of money from frontline staff and from those full-time equivalents into things like administration, supervisory roles, inspection, training, the other category? Do we have that breakdown from an early year to compare to?
Councillor Cartmel, unfortunately, we don't have that breakdown, and I'm not sure if Mr. Simpson and Mr. Sebrick would have it.
So, Councillor, for 2016, I believe that information probably would be available. We would need to go back and break it out, because at that point in time, we had two separate areas, one being in parks and recreation and one being in transportation. So that would be available to a certain extent, but we would be able to, I think, dissect some of that over a period of time if needed.
Okay, thank you. I'll come back around. Thank you.
Thanks. I apologize because for some reason my annotations are all gone, so this may be a bit scattered, but the first question I had was just about the overall spend, and except for one fairly brutal year where we were over, that I recall not enjoying from any perspective, elected or civic. We're under in all of the other ones, and I just wanted to ask whether that is a result of not meeting service levels, or really if we're able to say confidently that it snowed less than we budget for.
Council, or Your Worship, there's a couple of things. There is the the weather impact, which we did see in a number of those years, we also did make some changes to the program that did allow some efficiencies, which saw some cost reductions as well. So it would be a combination.
But those were not service level reductions, they were delivery methodology changes.
Correct. They
To
were
try to
procedural
achieve
changes.
to
Yes.
try to achieve the same service level. And the shift changes that are just coming into effect for this winter, for an example, those don't show up in this data, but those would improve that trend line?
They should give us the ability to both be more efficient as well as provide a more consistent level of service.
And they should also help us with the asset utilization, the trucks and the graders?
Correct.
Now, it said that we were getting better utilization on the active side with the smaller equipment and with the people power because the shift lengths were different. Was that always the case, or how did that evolve? Was it because that came from separate parts of the consolidation, or how is it that the shift length issue that we were dealing with on the mechanized side was less of an issue or not an issue on the active side?
That was part of it, Your Worship. There was, under the previous agreement, we could implement a shift change, but it would require approval from a particular work unit based on a vote. So in that case, we were able to work with that particular area to achieve that. Now.
Oh, that had previously done on the active side?
Correct.
Oh, okay. But now we're able to just push ahead with that for all of these areas?
For all the snow and ice, yes.
Okay, and if we went back and looked at that in a couple of years, that would have, either from a productivity lens or from a service delivery lens, that should be positive for the public.
Yes, and that should help us in terms of meeting some of the recommendations with respect to benchmarking as well, because we'll be able to look at what other jurisdictions do with respect to how they operate in terms of shift length as well.
And that's going to affect cost, or the overtime, which is going to affect cost, which is going to improve those cost per measures.
Correct.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, as well, just to expand on what Mr. Seabrook's saying, there's also a training component related to the graders. They are more complex and dangerous, obviously, compared to some of the active pathway equipment. So I think that probably has an impact as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would not want to be driving a grader. I have huge respect for the people who do that for a living. That said, it did say that our utilization overnight on the grader was better, but still far from complete. And it would seem to me that would be the time where we would want our graders deployed the most, would be when they disrupt traffic the least. So will we be looking at scheduling more overnight work as part of this as well?
Yes, and perhaps I can get Mr. Grant on the call to just provide a little bit of detail in terms of what we're doing with the shifts and the grader work.
Thanks, Cord. Yeah, when we look at the utilization of the motor graders within our operation, we needed to look at where our qualified operators were shifted and then spreading those experienced operators out throughout the entire operation to better resource all of the districts and give us the ability to have those graders cover, the inventory within the districts 24 hours a day. Historically, a lot of those positions were on straight days, and we didn't have the coverage that we wanted overnight. So we do have a lot of work to do still to get more operators trained, but that work is ongoing and will forever be ongoing. And ultimately a goal to have a better utilization across the board.
Great, thanks. I have more grader questions, but they'll wait for round two. So anybody else on round one? No? Okay, Councillor Essinger, go ahead.
Thank you. And I will start with the Community Sandbox Program. The way I read it here, the program has gone from $300,000 in 2016 to almost 900,000 in 2019. And I don't know if that's because we had worse winters some years or any kind of factors that accounted for the increase.
Couple of factors. One is the purchase of the sand, but that's not the big cost driver, is the resourcing to keep those sandboxes filled, and we have more of them in the community. So it's basically the resourcing to maintain the sand levels in those boxes.
So we've added more boxes. That's part of the factor. I'm just trying to understand that.
Yeah, there is more in the community. The number I think represented in the report was on 422. There are also other areas where there are also sandboxes that we're responsible for, so that number is a little on the low end. I think it may be closer to 700.
Okay, because the other thing is, I remember a few years ago when we took them away and we've added them back. So I was surprised that there was no program documentation about that. Or was that how that got missed or what happened there?
Councillor, I think that goes back to some of the recommendations that the auditor identified, and this needs to be part of our policy. It never really was part of the policy with some, identified outcomes. So we had basically been responding to what we were hearing for, serving the citizens, but we needed to put some more definition around that and line it up with the policy and then have a specific program for that along with a specifically coordinated budget. So I think that's where we're going in the future.
So,
And
yeah, Councillor Essinger, so I would basically go on with what Mr. Sebrick's saying. So you're right in terms of the program and why we made the recommendation. We observed that there was no program documentation for it that clearly defines the objective of the program, criteria for when a box should be placed, how often it should get refilled, who's allowed to use it, and it's not mentioned in the policy. So that's why, obviously, there can be a good use for the program, but because it's increased so much over the last 3 years, we thought that it needed to be defined better.
And I really appreciated administration's response saying that they would include public engagement about it before they came back with recommendations. So, because I think they have some expectations. But they link into my next area of questions was communication, because I think communication is key here. One, we need to communicate to people when they see their box empty, when it could be filled and how long it'll take to get there. But the one that really concerned me is that if I called 311, I would get a response, but if I called a counselor's office, it would take days longer. And that confused me. I'm not sure what's happening there.
Councillor, I would hazard to say that what we've been trying to do with inquiries is treat them all of the same sort of priority, but certainly there has been some discrepancy, and I think that's why we've identified that what we need to do is make the process for responding to inquiries, whether they be 311 or whether they be through a counselor's office or any other avenue, that they all have the same criteria in terms of response time and the resourcing and all of the aspects that go to providing the service. So your point is taken, and I think that's what the work going forward will be, is to make sure that all of the inquiries are responded to on a consistent basis.
And I think often we get called because people haven't seen action, so that could create duplication, but there's no way for us to figure that out. So I think an approved system would help that. The other one was the area of cul-de-sacs, because I think not everybody understands they might be on a different plan. So I think that's a bit about communication as well, to make sure people understood when their road was getting, because as long as we talk about neighborhood roads, people in cul-de-sacs thought they lived on a neighborhood road. So we have to be really clear in the communication. So I was really glad to see that that was going to be addressed through this audit. I think those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nicol.
Mr. Ewan, you're going to have to explain kind of a contradiction I'm seeing here. Page number 30 under Program Resources. It says, based on our observations, we conclude the overall PARS is planning, allocating, managing, and monitoring program resources to ensure effective, efficient, and economical delivery of the snow and ice control program, right? And you say below, in theory, the budget should be enough to deliver the approved level of service in an average winter. Yet, under performance management, a summary of findings, PARS performance, and it says right here, PARS performance measurement processes and publicly reported performance measures do not provide sufficient and reliable information to conclude on the effectiveness and efficiency of the city's snow and ice control activities. So, how do we reconcile those statements? That one statement says that you've made the observation that it's enough, effective and efficient, then you say you don't have the measures to assess whether it's effective and efficient. Am I misreading that? That's page 22 versus page 30.
Essentially, the performance measurement that would be for the accomplishments, not for the results. So we're looking for measures that can measure some of the accomplishments, some of the service levels that the policy is going to have in place. Ultimately, the results, the department and the branch are doing everything possible to deliver the service, but once we have the agreed upon measures in the policy, that's when we believe that there needs to be better and more in-depth analysis.
Okay, maybe I'm just missing it. I'll try it again. Either we have the measures to properly assess the program in place, so we can make the statement that has been made on page 30, or we do not. So am I missing something here with regards to the clarity of the KPIs?
We require better measures. That's why we have the recommendation.
Okay, so I'll turn over to an example here that you've raised on page, what is this, page 33, and it has been mentioned before regarding owned equipment versus contracted out equipment. In your review of the department, did you find any measures with regards to contractor performance management?
Councillor Nicol, no, that's why we made the recommendation on recommendation 6 that they perform regular assessments of the cost of in-house services versus the cost of contracted services.
So we cannot say today whether in-house is cheaper than out-of-house at this point. Is that a fair statement?
That is why we have recommendation 6, yes.
Okay. I think, so I guess with, before I get to poor Mr. Corbold with some of my questions, I'm going to go to page 54. And 54 is all about and I'd like clarification, and where it says, we identify some areas of improvement in the communication plan. Tactics are identified but not clearly defined. Who does what, when, where, and how. Is this particularly in referring to how we communicate to our constituents? Does this refer to our own staff and management, or what are we referring that to?
The communications that we looked at would be for both parties, all stakeholders. So obviously, as Mr. Simpson outlined, there needs to be a better process in place to communicate downwards to staff, but also the public needs to understand the expectations of the program.
I would agree, because communications is very important about managing customers' expectations, or constituents. Okay, one more round for me coming.
Councillor Cartmell, is Councillor Knack still on the first round or second now? Okay, right, Councillor Knack, then Councillor Cartmell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As for recommendation 4, I'm curious when that comes back, if we're going to have a better understanding of what parts of the city receive certain service standards. And I know I've chatted with some folks about this before, but from what I understand, and that's still the case, like we don't know which, even for example, what sidewalks get cleared versus what ones don't versus what ones get cleared at certain times, or it's known sort of by district level, but there's no like single citywide map that shows us here's when we're going to clear this sidewalk versus that sidewalk. So will that be part of what's we're getting in recommendation 4?
Councillor, I think that's part of recommendation 4, but also part of the policy conversation, because what we want to be able to do is identify clearly in the policy what the target levels are or outcomes are for our shared modes or shared use facilities, and from that the administrative procedure will dictate what those metrics look like, and then based on that we want to make sure that that's applied consistently across the city, so that in one district it's the same as another district for whether it be a multi-use trail or a bike facility or a sidewalk. So through that, then that would identify what we need to measure, what we need to convey to citizens, and then through the public communications piece, and that means things like the real-time maps, that would all be what we'd be looking for.
Okay. Another question I have relates to the equipment that we use, and I'm curious. I know that a lot of the equipment we buy, we try to buy equipment that can be used for multiple purposes. Being that we do have a fair enough length of time of winter. It's not 8 months of winter. Sometimes it can be 6, but oftentimes it's 4 months of solid winter that we have to deal with. Do we have the right combination of equipment to be able to deliver the service as currently outlined in the policy? And then I guess to a degree, do we expect that answer to change based on the new policy that's being developed?
So, Councillor, I'll start by just providing a little bit of overarching sort of philosophy, is that we do try and use or purchase equipment that we can get the most use out of on an annual basis. There are pieces of equipment, for example, that just there's no alternative. For example, our snow blowers, there's no alternative. You have to have them, and they only have limited use. But in regards to the policy, I guess a lot of that will depend on what the policy looks like and what changes we want to make to different service levels and different facilities. But I'm going to ask Mr. Grant just to provide a little bit of insight into how our current equipment is operating and where he's seeing the challenges.
Okay, that'd be great.
Sure. So when it comes to our roadway network specifically, we have a number of different combinations of trucks, sanders, underbody plows versus front mount plows, and those do work well. And then when we talk about the divide of hired equipment versus internal equipment, that's when the graders come in. They ultimately perform a completely different function than those trucks that we have operate. So I would say yes, we do have the proper equipment for our roadways, but then when we're looking at our active pathways, sidewalks, and all of that inventory, we have taken a different approach over the last few years in how we're attacking that inventory. And the sidewalk plows that we do have are they're a good machine for what we're doing. We're always looking to upgrade and look at new innovations and kind of swap out some of our older equipment with new and more advanced equipment that's on the market as we replace those new units. So I think the equipment that we have is adequate to do the job. But we're always looking to upgrade to find equipment that is more productive always.
That's helpful, and that will probably be a further conversation when the policy comes back. But I just want to double check, because again, my understanding is that there are active pathways, particularly sidewalks, some multi-use trails by schools that we don't, that are in city inventory that don't get cleared all winter long. There's parks, Terralosa Park is a good example. We clear the outside but not the inside, so we don't actually do all of the active pathways in the winter, correct?
That's correct. We do the perimeter parks that lead to major corridors like bus stops and other major, arterial pedestrian walkways. But we do not do the interior parks that say a path that would lead to, say, a playground, or a dead end in a park.
And
I'm out of
Councillor, that'll be likely part of the policy conversation in terms of what level of service we want to provide across the entire mobility network.
Appreciate that. I'm out of time. I'll probably have a few more questions still. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cartmel?
Thank you. I'll pick up where I left off. Mr. Seabrook, we were talking about that chart, I believe, on page 7, and I was asking if we had, you know, a year previous that we could compare to. You said something to the effect of that previously these budgets were split between parks and roadways, but my understanding from Mr. Ewan's comments was that all of these dollars and all of these comparisons are with respect to the snow and ice program only. So can you elaborate?
Sure, I can clarify that. So what I was alluding to is Mr. Ewan is correct. They are specifically to snow and ice programs, but they used to be in two separate departments. There was a snow and ice control program for the roads, which was part of transportation, and there was a snow and ice control program for some of the trail network as well as some of the other facilities as part of the parks budget. So what we would need to do is go and look at how that breaks down. But they are specific to snow and ice, however, they were in two different business areas.
Okay, thank you. I understand. And so looking then to the policy changes, in 2018, we added active transportation modes. The chart on page 6 includes information on active pathways. Which of the items in the active pathways chart would have been added as active transportation modes? I'm guessing not all of these things were added in 2018.
That's correct. Not all were added. You know, there were some specific things such as the separated bike grid that was added, as well as some of the other shared use facilities. Perhaps Mr. Grant can speak to what was added that year.
Yeah, the biggest addition to the inventory was the protected bike lanes, and then also just prioritizing all that inventory. As Parks and Roads did come together as a branch, there was two different sections that came together with similar inventory. So we had to align all of that inventory and routing. Same amount of I'll call it lineal kilometer of inventory, but we needed to ensure that we found the most productive way to clear those routes.
So the only thing really added in 2018 would have been the protected bike lanes. Is that correct?
Added to the inventory, yes. I think the overall change would have been the prioritization of certain inventory within that scope of work.
So if I was to generalize sort of all the questions I've asked, it sounds like we've got the same amount of money, not even increasing for inflation or population. We've got more roads. We've added active transportation, albeit whether we're reprioritizing or just adding bike lanes. And we have less staff doing all of those things. Is that a fair characterization?
That would be correct.
And is it fair to say that on top of that, we're doing less roads as priority 1, or maybe I'll say it differently. We have the same amount of roadway by category as we always did as priority 1s, but we've added more priority 1 things like the items that Mr. Grant was just talking about, the separated bike grid, some of the higher priority multi-use trails, etc.
I think in terms of prioritization, we have increased the actual volume of roads and other facilities that are a higher level of service.
So when people say there's less plows plowing the roads, they're right.
Well, I guess, Councillor Cartmel, the one qualifier would be that they are done with different pieces of equipment, though.
There's less pieces of equipment plowing the roads.
Well, no, the plowing the roads use different pieces of equipment compared to the active pathways. Sorry for.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, thank you, Mr. Ewan. I understood that. I'm curious about the economies of scale that we lose by having that separation. So for instance, when the active pathways work is done, is it done before the roadway work would be done? And you know, on that separation, on that delineation, is that what happens? Do we have the crews that are doing the active pathways finish their work before the crews on the roadways finish their work?
So perhaps Mr. Grant can speak to the timing, but certainly if you look at a specific snow event and there's a prioritization hierarchy, a priority one facility will have the same start time and may have a different end time depending on the volume of roads. So if I was to compare arterials, for example, to the bike grid network, we would certainly be able to complete the bike grid network because it's much smaller and confined as opposed to arterial one classification. But perhaps Mr. Grant can just provide a little more detail.
Mr. Seabrick, I guess that's my point. If we have resources that finish the bike grid and the higher priority active pathways, we cannot then redeploy those resources when they finish that first task into doing road work as a second task. They move on to priority twos while priority one roads remain to be finished, right? Because they're discrete crews. Is that correct?
So perhaps Mr. Grant can add, but basically what we would do on a snow event is ensure that all of the pieces of equipment that are available will be on the road, and the resourcing to operate those is basically done through adjusting what we have for our labor force. So Andrew, can you just provide a little more detail on that?
Sure. So when we do have a snow event, Gord's correct, is that our crews all have the same start time. The active pathways do have different completion times, whether it's in priority 124 hours versus 36. But Councillor Carmel, you're also correct in saying that those crews also have alternative work in the priority 2s and 3s within their program. So they're not returning back to the districts to drive trucks. But we've also taken a different approach in the districts and relying on the off shifts and calling in overtime to fill as many of our units, our available units as we can. So they don't go back and forth in an effort to eliminate the priorities in each area and making kind of everything a priority with the set out work in front of them when it does snow.
Okay, I understand. They don't go to the trucks because we've called in other people to drive the trucks already. The extra trucks.
That's correct, yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I've got just a couple more questions. I'll wait for another round. Thank you.
Thank you. So one thing that was a little hard for me to track, and I went back to this after looking at the productivity piece that we're going to talk about later, is trying to track over time, you know, as the inventory has grown that we need to manage. We've talked a little bit about the resourcing, which is a bit of a proxy for it, and staffing. But in terms of hard numbers of equipment, is there attrition in that as it's aging out, or has there been growth in the fleet proportionate to the actual physical expansion of the inventory?
Looking at the overall numbers, about 45, the number is 45 for increase in equipment, but a main part of that is on the APR program, not on the road equipment. Pretty standard on the trucks in the program in terms of what's offered. Every district has a different number depending on the actual geographic area they're responsible for. I think another piece I need to add to this is just those trucks in the shoulder seasons are changing over for asphalt, also for spring sweep. So there is a transition process when that equipment is being transitioned to support those other programs. And as I'm sitting here today, we're already talking spring sweep and what that's going to look like, and then the timing of that changeover. So that also has an impact on the resourcing level when we're in that shoulder season.
Right. Yeah, I remember when we had to bolt a bunch of stuff on for Calgary a couple of years ago because we're so generous. And we were able to do that quickly, which was really impressive. So on the graders, though, I remember there was talk a couple of years ago while we were looking at annexation and the growth because of the dual use on the seasonal. We've got so much more gravel on the south side now from the old county. Are we doing that with the same number of graders and then supplementing with contractor, or have we acquired more graders in the last few years?
I'll let Andy answer this question in terms of numbers, but we do have a grader dedicated to that area, but it was out of the existing resource pool.
Yeah, so we are maintaining that newly annexed area with all of the equipment that we've had over the past 4 years. We're finding that we can do a lot of the work with our front mount truck plows, and then when we do see heavy snowfall or drifting, that's when we send out our graders that have the specialty blades and stuff for removing large amounts of snow. So if we do run into an event where we do need to supply that annexed area with additional resources, we would have the ability to leverage those grader contracts to supply that demand.
Great.
Mr. Mayor, I believe the graders have grown by 4 units between 2015 and 2019 as well.
Okay, that's good, given the physical growth of the city, provided we can deploy them, and if the shift issues allow us then to deploy them more aggressively, that'll be good, both for summer and for winter. Now, just shifting gears a little bit, of the active pathways maintenance, one could read this and come away with an impression that this is all about bike lanes. But what portion of the active pathways network is sidewalk infrastructure, roughly?
Your worship, I'd have to get that information, but we could get that to you in terms of percentage.
Vast majority, though, I think, yes.
Yes, and if you actually, Mr. Mayor, if you look on page 6 of the report, we show that actually bike lane routes are only 38 kilometers, service sidewalks are 1,447 so it's a small portion.
And the other large portion is the multi-use trail network in the River Valley.
Yes.
Which, and the rationale for a high level of service for those is that people of all mobility circumstances use that network, and from a universal accessibility and public safety, slip and fall, and not so much liability ultimately, but public health, public good, public safety imperative. That's why it's a high priority ultimately. Is that fair?
Yes. Correct, and that those outcomes you mentioned certainly align with the longer term vision of city plan.
And about 5,800 bus stops on top of that too.
Right, yeah, I was gonna ask because I didn't see bus stops, and that inventories. Now, we may get a bit of efficiency there with bus network redesign. That's gonna help us with operating costs related to this.
Correct.
And hopefully, but is that gonna mean more timely removal of the stuff that we are maintaining, or cost savings, or both?
I think that's what we'll try and rationalize, but ultimately we would like to do a better job if possible for particular those transit patrons.
And Mr. Ewan, I think your observations in here about change management are fair given all of the mixed policy signals council has given over the years, and the restructuring that this part of the organization has been through over the last several years as well. Would you have, I think it says, adjust change management going forward. I don't think we're going to have as many significant changes in this area, but what advice would you have for us around remedial approach in this area to try to smooth things over?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I believe some of what's taking place now with the current management team, trying to communicate changes, why they're making changes, getting input from the frontline employees to make sure that they believe that they're being heard, because ultimately they are going to be the ones that are delivering the service, so they have to have buy-in to the service. So I think that increased communication is really important, and then that discussion, that very important discussion that's going to take place in the spring with on the policy, I think is going to be important, that both City Council and City Administration are also on the same page.
Your Worship, might add too, we've had an embedded communication person to support the team, which has been very impactful in terms of what we're experiencing. And also when I'm going out on my visits, I have support from communications, doing surveys. That individual goes off, talks to the employees individually to see what they're looking for and need in terms of a communication process coming back. So there's active work ongoing in that process.
Thanks. Third round, Councillor Nickel.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Corbould, I think I should give you an opportunity here to talk since you're a direct employee. What is your take on page 68 with regards to the 9 leadership changes, 3 policy changes, 6 organizational structure changes, 7 operational changes over 5 years, and the consequences to the service delivery?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of change over a short period of time, and as I think I've mentioned in some of my discussions already, we need to stabilize the organizational changes in the city, and that's what we're going to do. Having said that, I think that there's been some very positive changes throughout the entire city organization in terms of integrating better and managing projects better, and so sometimes those changes are required, and I can't speak to exactly why they were made at the time, but it is absolutely a lot of change in a short period of time. But I do see a lot of stability going ahead, and so, but I also think some of those changes were probably required to achieve some of the other things that we wanted to achieve, like integration across departments and like project management.
So, Mr. Corbould, I like asking kind of direct and simple questions. For the staff, what's going to be different in 6 months? What's going to be different in 12 months? What's going to be different in 18 months, given that this was an employee-driven request for this value for money audit? What's going to be different for them? Because I think that's what they want to know.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, and my answer is leadership. One of the things that I've noticed when I read this report is that that word's not mentioned. But there's a lot of recommendations and actions that have been accepted by administration that really speak to leadership. So when I think about decision-making processes, when I think about owning decisions and employees being able to influence those decisions, that comes down in my mind to good leadership. And so I would be worried if there was a bunch of argumentative leaders in the system going, I don't like these recommendations. What gives me great optimism is I see nothing but a bunch of leaders throughout the system listening, welcoming the recommendations, and doing a bunch of hard work now to implement those recommendations. So I think what the employee is going to see is more consistent leadership, more involvement, more discussions, more of their concerns being raised, and I'll certainly help make sure that happens. But that's what I'm hearing in terms of what we've done. What I haven't done yet is spoken to these employees yet, and I will be doing that over the course of the coming weeks.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's something I wanted to hear, to be quite frank. But I got to say to you, Mr. Corbould, I'm a little concerned of yet another policy change, yet another review, yet another change in what I see moving the goalposts. How do we say to the constituents and the taxpayers that we have fixed the goalposts with regards to the service delivery here if we're going to keep changing what we're doing? It's not like we haven't been clearing snow here for a while, is I guess what my constituents would say to me. And so why is it so hard to get some consistent performance metrics just nailed down?
Well, I don't think it is that hard, and I haven't looked at what's happened in the past sort of 5 to 10 years necessarily. But I think the steps in these recommendations and the acceptance of them will move towards that. In terms of change management, I like to follow Cotter's 8 principles of change management, including communications and having change agents. So that's when I looked at this report and then our response to it, I kind of went down my checklist of change management pieces, and I see it all playing together. The only thing, like I said, I see lacking in some of the documentation here is the word leadership, and that's what I think the employees are going to see as we go forward, because I see a team here pushing for that, and maybe we have to say that more clearly.
Thank you.
Councillor Knack.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few more questions around equipment. So in Councillor Cartmel's questions, what made me want to make sure I remind myself that when we're doing priority 1 on the roads, we don't do that all in-house. We contract out close to half of that typically on a priority 1 snow event for arterials. Is that correct?
Councillor, you're mostly accurate. There are depending on the magnitude of the event. So perhaps Mr. Grant can give a little more context around how that would break down.
Sure, that'd be great.
Sure. So the priority 1s and 2s on our roadways are actually dispatched at the exact same time. So when I talk about the differences in our equipment, when we're using our front mounts and underbodies and sander trucks, that equipment is actually used to maintain our priority 1s because those are our higher speeder arterials. When we talk, Yellowhead, Manning to Williger, and all of those like roadways. And then when we call in the graders to support us, they are tasked with doing the priority 2 bus runs. So same start time, but then just different end and service level times. So the work is done at the same time. It just has different times to stop. So then when those priority 1s are done and those trucks and equipment are available, then they'll jump into the priority 3s. And then if the accumulation warrants it, we'll head into the residential priority 4 network.
So again, just for wrapping it up in my head, we don't do that all in house though. Priority 1 and 2, we've developed our system in a way that does require contracting out in order to be able to accomplish those pieces.
Yeah, so there is situations like we've seen actually quite a few of them this winter where we have small amounts of snowfall, a little bit each week, where our crews are available or are equipped and able to keep up with that accumulation. But when we see large fast accumulation, yes, that's when the contractors come into the hand, and we make sure that we leverage every resource that we have available to us. So it is very dependent on virtually how the snow falls and whether our teams are able to keep up. We try to keep it all in-house, but there is a time where we have to rely on those contractors.
And that's fine. I just wanted to make sure I understood when that would happen. The other piece that jumped out at me in that audit was that breakdown in percentage of how much we're doing different tasks. When I looked at the sanding, salting percentage, which actually is, I think, just slightly above the removal, or not the hauling away of snow, but the grading, or whatever you would refer to it as. I was trying to remember how they defined it. Plowing, sorry, just the plowing portion. Is that a ratio? And I guess maybe we don't know because we haven't been able to measure against other cities. And I'm just curious, is that where we should be, or does that say to us that the reason we're sanding so much is because we don't have enough equipment to go out and clear the roads in a timely way? Again, you're never going to always get down to pavement everywhere, so you'll need to have sand. But I'm just wondering if that's part of this analysis will determine if that's the right breakdown of work.
Sure. Well, we always when we are out plowing, our standard or our best practice is to apply abrasives after we plow, because there always is that residual ice and snow that slips under the blades of the equipment and does possibly create a slippery surface. So they're kind of doing everything at once: plowing, blading, removing, adding abrasive to just ultimately regain traction on that roadway.
Okay.
So that is an industry best practice for sure.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah. When it comes to the new policy, will there be a proper? Because I think one of the challenges we run into, there still seems to be a bit of confusion around, what gets done when, and it feels to me that again we do very much, and I think the audit breaks it down, that we have a plan related to how we deal with our roadway network, and we have a plan related to how we deal with active transportation. But the policy, I feel, sometimes gets confused that they're one and the same when there's different crews, different equipment, different requirements, expectations. So is the new policy going to better reflect that reality?
So, Councillor, I think the intent with what we'll bring forward is that the policy is clearly defining what those outcomes are, and the administrative directive that supports that will identify some of the more operational pieces that will support that in terms of the timelines as well as the equipment and those sorts of things. So what we want to do is clearly divide the policy statement from the actual operational procedure, but the two need to be very well connected.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm out of time. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'll probably have one more question still. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cartmel.
Thank you. So just one question on the active pathways.
Just before you get going, we're right up at 3:30, but we started half an hour late, so I'm going to presume we can power through on this item to completion, then take the break in between. So if there's no objection to that, then carry on. Okay, we'll start your timer again, Councillor Cartmel. Go ahead.
Thank you. So just one question on the active pathways. The multi-use trail system, in the River Valley, along the LRT alignments, et cetera, that's long been a priority of the Parks group, even before the two groups were amalgamated, correct?
Councillor, there was priority. I think the part that was not clear was we had different priorities for similar facilities. So that was part of what we wanted to achieve by bringing the two programs together, was that we had some consistency. We started down that path, but certainly there's more in terms of what we need to get for consistency on the facilities that are similar.
Yeah, fair enough. The point I was trying to make was it's not a new thing that multi-use trails get attention relatively early in the cycle. I would like to go to page 39. There's a comment there that our sanding trucks are not calibrated to distribute, and I believe this is meant to say 100% salt. That there's a calibration question and an adequacy of equipment question. And I've asked this question before, and I was assured that those sanders could be calibrated to distribute salt. This audit suggests otherwise. Thoughts on that?
Perhaps Mr. Grant can provide a little bit of information, and then if Mr. Ewan would like to add.
Sure. So the trucks historically, have been calibrated to distribute massive amounts of sand. So when we took a look at the operation and started looking at using the right tool for the right job, 100% sodium chloride was a tool that we used. So with the mass difference of sand versus salt, we did have to undertake some operational changes, but they are calibrated to make sure that we are dispensing the proper amounts of salt or sand. And those calculations have been taken into account when we're doing the calibration of those units.
So, yeah, Councillor Cartmel, I can echo what Mr. Grant said. So he's correct. Obviously, the mass weight of sand and salt is significantly different. And the trucks were initially set up for sand, which is a much heavier mass. So now when you look at whether it's going to be 75%, 50%, 25%, yeah, the trucks have to be recalibrated, and I think that's taken place now. And there were some initial trial and error that took place over the last couple of years, but now it is definitely being performed much more effectively.
So is the intent to use sodium chloride, 100% sodium chloride, no sand, to melt our way to bare pavement? Is that our intent?
The intent of using the 100% sodium chloride is to ultimately achieve traction. We have those shoulder season weather events like freezing rain or minimal amounts of snow where we can't actually plow it. Melting it off the roads is the most efficient way to get down to a bare pavement and regain traction.
What about when we get that compacted snow that turns to ice, and that inch or two thick layer of ice as opposed to snowpack? We're not trying to melt that down to bare pavement with ice, with salt, are we?
No, we have a number of different tools that we can use. We can use serrated ice blades to bring that down to a more comparable level, and then we would add some salt and sand mixture to provide traction within that serrated ice surface, in hopes to get that salt to work to bring it down to pavement. So no, I wouldn't recommend putting just salt down on a thick layer of ice.
And our operators know that we're not trying to melt our way to bare pavement. We're maybe adding traction in the moment on a shoulder season, but we're not trying to melt our way through the snow as opposed to plowing it where appropriate.
Yeah, that is all part of our training for our plow operators and our supervisors that we go through every year. So yes, I would say in confidence that they do understand the difference between, you know, serrated ice blages and where they can be used versus straight sodium chloride.
Thank you. Those are all my questions. I would echo Councillor Nichols' comment that we should not move the goalposts. I don't think I could have said it better myself last week. Thank you.
Councillor Knack?
Yeah, just the last sort of few questions here related to access to technology to be able to make sure we're communicating. And I know, you know, things like the interactive map haven't necessarily been a top priority because there's other priorities that we're going to have a more measurable impact for people throughout the department. So I appreciate that that's maybe why we haven't rushed to do that. But I do want to check to see if we've got a system in place or a process in place that will get us to that point. And I'm not just referring to the interactive map, but I think, you know, there were still plenty of examples of where even certain calls that come in, if they're coming in through an office, they get emailed and then they get printed out and put on a desk. And so there's reference to that in the recommendations, but I just want to make sure we've got the technical support in place to allow this department to do what they need to do, or will be having that in place.
So, Councillor, I'll start and then I'll perhaps ask Ms. Owen to jump in. But I think the biggest thing that we've learned over the course of the last 5 years, not only with this program, but with all of the programs we deliver in the city, is what an integral part communications is for the success of any of the programs. It's not an add-on and something that's nice to do. In order for our crews to deliver or citizens to understand what they are going to receive, we need to have the communication, and it's an integral part. It's just as important as the actual piece of equipment doing the snow and ice control. So that probably is the biggest thing we have going for us, is understanding that the communications is a key part of success. So that's the overarching bit. Now the actual delivery of that, you know, falls to us building the processes. And I think Ms. Owen could probably speak to a little bit about what she sees that can help us be better connected with citizens and our employees.
So in addition to deploying the tools that are referenced in the report, the just-in-time social media tools, we're currently piloting in another area a digital assistant approach, which will enable us down the road to be much more timely and effective in our ability to answer questions and deal with concerns in an automated and very efficient way. I see no reason why the learnings from that pilot won't be ported over into snow and ice to further enhance the snow and ice communications.
Excellent. Those are all my questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Want to move receipt of information?
Yes, willing to do that. Thank you.
Great, of both. Okay. Are there any further comments? Not seeing any. Please vote on receipt of information.
We have all the votes, Mr. Mayor.
Display the vote, please. That's carried. All right, let's take 12-ish minutes now and come back around 3:50 to carry on with the agenda. So let's recess for a bit here. Thank you. All right, let's roll call in a few seconds here. Turn your cameras back on, committee members, if you're in the house. All right. So I'll check with Vice Chair Knack. Are you there?
Yes, sorry, there we go. Mute button.
Super. Councillor Essinger?
Good afternoon.
Welcome back. Councillor Cartmel?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. Councillor Nickel?
Good afternoon.
Welcome back. Mr. Burrows?
Good afternoon.
Thank you. And Mr. Edmondson?
I'm here, thank you.
Welcome. And do we have guest members of council at this time still? Anyone else on the call? Councillor Henderson? Not hearing from anyone else. We certainly have quorum, so we'll resume and get the presentation on the Part 2 City Productivity and Performance Audit, Productivity and Performance Measures Analysis for Mr. Ewan, and then the administrative commentary. So go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want to start off by saying that this type of audit could not have been possible without the cooperation of all city departments. I want to thank all the deputy city managers and their staff for giving us access to the key people that guide their performance measurement work in their business areas. This report presents the results of Part 2 of the City Productivity and Performance Audit. This audit focused on productivity and performance measures for a number of service areas. As we recall, Part 1 was focused on a management staffing analysis. This audit provides a corporate level summary of the city's performance for years 2015 to 2019. As we have highlighted in this report, there are program areas of strong performance and other areas where performance is lagging. This audit examined 27 program areas and identified 52 productivity and performance measures. One of our audit objectives was to assess how well the city is externally comparing itself to others. During this audit, we found that city services are being measured and monitored for performance. However, productivity itself is not a priority measurement for most services. There is also limited use and reporting of benchmarking being undertaken by the city. This means that city decision makers may miss out on opportunities to explore operational differences and improve performance. Why do we believe benchmarking is so important? Well, as you know, today's municipalities are challenged by an ever-increasing demand to deliver a greater variety and a higher level of public services while maintaining low taxes and user fees. To meet this challenge, municipal governments are continually looking for new ways to improve performance, both operational and fiscally. The City of Edmonton has put in place initiatives such as the Program and Service Review, the Reimagine Work, and the Enterprise Performance Management Framework to make transformational change. We have made a recommendation that the administration explore best practices to implement a corporate process for incorporating benchmark measures into the Enterprise Performance Management Framework for city services. By incorporating this process, the administration will be able to identify and gather comparable metrics and prepare benchmark reports to prompt questions, start discussions, identify and share leading practices, and ultimately improve the municipal services provided to Edmontonians. Thank you.
Thank you. The city welcomes the auditor's findings and the recommendations of the productivity and performance measurement analysis of the performance and productivity audit. With me today are Mary Pearson, our CFO, and online we've got Kimberly Matheson, our branch manager of service innovation and performance, Mike Clue, the director of department strategy, and Tanya Way, our director of strategic management and corporate performance. The auditor's report identified limited productivity measures were within the city's services performance measures, and the recommendation was put forward to explore best practice in incorporating productivity and benchmark measures into the Enterprise Performance Management Framework. In response to the recommendation, a project will be conducted to ensure performance management is effectively measuring and monitoring productivity, improving productivity or performance through performance monitoring and reporting, and monitoring productivity or performance in comparison to external organizations. I'm now going to pass it to Mike Clue to do the balance of the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. McCabe. We manage our performance in order to enable a better life for Edmontonians, provide better service, and make better decisions. Our enterprise performance management framework provides us with a systematic process for managing how we're doing on the things that matter. It's about helping our administration and council learn, improve, and achieve the results that are important to Edmontonians. EPM structure allows us to measure how well we deliver the three components of the corporate business plan, which are transforming our city for the future, delivering excellent services for today, and managing our corporation. Benchmarking indicators are currently embedded within the EPM framework, and through our participation in the Data for Canadian Cities project, we received platinum certification and joined a globally recognized list of cities who are benchmarking using international standards for city data. Noted are some examples of how approximately 100 indicators are aligned to our corporate business plan. Currently, we have one ISO certification for sustainable cities and communities, and future certifications include benchmarking indicators that pertain to smart cities and resilient cities. To further our maturity in benchmarking, EPM has been working closely with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and Statistics Canada to determine common data and reporting needs for Canadian municipalities. The implementation of the productivity and performance audit recommendations will integrate benchmarking measures into an existing EPM structure that's very deliberate in what we measure and why. Productivity measures will show how much of an impact we're making towards attainment of our goals, and benchmarking productivity will help identify opportunities for improving efficiency.
Thank you, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Essinger, go ahead.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciated this work, and it's important for us to measure ourselves, and I think the comment is, how are we doing better, and how do we serve our public the best is really essential. I do have a specific question that caused me a bit of pause, though, because while I think productivity is important, it may not be the only measure. So, Mr. Ewing, on page 15 of your report, you talked about the community and neighborhood capacity building, and it referred to the NRCs, or the neighborhood resource coordinators, and there's really talked about the number of connections. I guess I'm fearful that it's not just about the number of connections, it's the quality of connections. And the sidebar talks about that we never talk to community leagues or external groups to know if this is right. Can you just speak to that?
So, Councillor Essinger, you're right in terms of globally for all measures. It can't only be about productivity, the quality. There are other factors that you have to factor in whenever you're measuring productivity, and you might be more productive, but if you're not effective in some ways, or the quality of communication is lacking, then that productivity doesn't mean a hill of beans. So I would agree with that. And in terms of the question on, so what was the other question in terms of the community league? Sorry.
Well, it was just making sure, because the sidebar talks about reference to a survey, but the survey is not asking the same question, so I didn't understand how they connected.
Yeah, so that was basically trying to provide some additional information on the fact that what we saw is that the survey may not be digging deep enough or relevant in terms of measuring their productivity.
Yes, because I know how community leagues are feeling right now about that program, and it's not that well. So that caused me concern, and what that did is made me think about the other measures.
Yes, and you're right, the survey, I think, will be changed to start measuring the quality of the survey, the quality of the services that are being provided, sorry.
Okay, then I just want to turn to administration. I mean, I think productivity against our peer-to-peer or other municipalities is important, but how do you balance those unique ones? Because, for example, many cities don't have community leagues like we do. So how do you balance those kind of benchmarks when there is no comparator?
Yeah, great question, Councillor, and that's why looking at benchmarking and the whole host of enterprise performance management is so important. Another thing you probably want to have on it is the customer service lens and how you make somebody feel after your interaction with them. And so that's why we've suggested that productivity alone isn't the right way to understand if we're satisfying Edmontonians' needs, that it is one component within enterprise performance management within that framework.
Thank you. I appreciate those answers. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Knack?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have one specific question, but I don't know if it's worth getting too much into it. Can I ask, is there someone who I can ask about the municipal enforcement officers? Is there someone here who would be able to answer any question related to that?
We can give it a shot. Councillor Knack, Rob Smythe here.
Sure. And I mean, this can maybe apply more broadly, but I just know that something like this group has struggled in the past with access to technology to, say, submit concerns. And there was a conversation previously that they would be, afforded the opportunity to use digital devices to submit things directly. And so I'm curious, it's specific to this, but maybe more broadly, if that type of technology is being leveraged to help improve efficiency and productivity.
Councillor, we have done some scoping of what that technology, how that would help. It is not funded at this point in time, but certainly are aware of that work, and we're working with our colleagues in OCT to move that forward. So it's certainly something that's on the radar screen, and it'll be addressed over the next year, hopefully a year, but maybe a bit longer.
So I guess that question, if it's not funded, but we know it's going to have a fairly measurable impact, when do those type of things come before council? Because using that as the example again, like from my understanding, they have to go out, they have to visually indicate, what's the infraction, and then they have to go back to the office to submit their paperwork, and they have to spend, hours upon hours doing that versus being able to do it on the fly with a press of a button and then allowing them to do far more. So whether it's this, whether it's those other items, when would things like that come before council to say, you really got to invest $100,000 to make sure the technology is there so that we can save, half the time?
So, Councillor Knack, before Mr. Smythe goes forward, I agree 100% with where you're going with that, and essentially technology is vital when you're trying to increase productivity, and part of what we are thinking of doing in our 2021 audit, that is again going to be another productivity audit, is looking at those areas where potentially better technology and better automation may help to increase productivity. So that's something that as we dig deeper into some of those areas that may be lagging because of the lack of technology.
Okay, that's great. I can wait for that then. I don't need to spend more. Sorry, go ahead.
Councillor, it's Mary Pearson. Just there is a process, and what happens is we do have, because with OCT, there is an intake process. We are talking about limited resources, but we do consider when there are savings with respect to productivity. There are several areas in the city where technology could benefit, but we actually like to take a holistic approach to that as well. So if it could benefit these peace officers, could it benefit other peace officers and others? So it takes a little bit more time to make sure we can have a holistic approach, but we are also happy to bring forward how we do prioritize those, how we do actually try and harvest the savings in order to do the investments. There is an active program that does that, and we have several examples as well where we've actually done that. And one is Ms. McCabe and her some of her inspections.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Ewan, the other question I had, this is one of the few audits I read, and the recommendation and then the response, and I still felt like I didn't necessarily have a clear path as to what's happening. So your recommendation talked about exploring best practices, and as a city, we've already been doing a lot of that work, and Ms. McCabe has been advancing that. The response is to pilot a piece here, and I'm just not sure I necessarily understand how we close this one off. The recommendation, and apologize if it's clear to everyone else but me, but I read through it and I don't feel like here's what you're going to be looking for at the end of Q4 and saying, yes, this is now complete because it's going to be expanded. Can you offer me some help on this one?
So, Councillor Knack, as you know, the city has the EPM program in place, and a relatively new branch that is in charge with that, the Innovation and Performance branch. So we will be working with them to determine how they are trying to incorporate benchmarking as part of the EPM program. And we'll want to see a real desire and intent that is taking place. So that is how we would be looking for evidence in terms of closing the recommendation.
So it wouldn't just be the completion of that timeline that you see there, it's more than that.
You're right. It would be more than that. We'll be looking at the pilot project. We'll be looking at the results of the pilot project, how far it went, and honestly, whether there was a real desire and intent on the branch and the administration's part to incorporate benchmarking into the measurements.
Okay, thank you. I'm out of time.
Thank you. So there were just two that stood out for me. One was the information technology numbers on page 30 and 31, which looked good, and like most of the other ones where there are benchmarks, we're doing well. The one that leapt off the page was the total spending per FTE of around 5,500 versus 1,200 for the benchmark. And, where the variance is small, that's maybe just good on its own, but where it's this big, do we have any drill down on whether that's, are we doing something radically different? I know we moved to cloud apropos of the other audit ahead of lots of other places, and that was a big cost savings to do with that. But does this account for capitalization differently, or, what, do we have a sense of why the variance might be so big on page 31 there?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is one where you think it's good, but you're also concerned at the same time as
are we
somebody who works
under-resourced?
to whether we're under-resourced. So what we've done is note the measurements is probably pretty consistent, though it is different orders of government, so there may be different requirements for office work as compared to others. So we are looking a little bit more deeply into that. But the other thing we're looking at is we do recognize that this only captures what we spend in OCT, or Open Cities and Technology. So we are trying to get a better handle on what the overall spend is to do a benchmark comparator as well.
Oh, because there may be things that would be captured in other people's cost centers if they track it differently. Okay.
So we're looking at a pilot to track this a bit better to see if it's normalized to benchmark or if it is a true underspend, to which we'll come back because it does affect Mr. Knack, or Councillor Knack's question. I apologize.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and Mr. Kobold's been really good about asking people in the different places he's visited if they have the tools that they need, but he hasn't asked me if I have the tools that I need to do what I need to do.
And Mr.
In fairness,
Mayor,
I haven't asked him if he has the tools he needs yet either, which I suppose I should at some point. But
and Mr. Mayor, I think you hit it on the head, whether we are investing in the right technology. And I think the last year of the remote working from home, and even probably some of the challenges that city councils faced in some of these meetings, you see how important IT infrastructure is. So investing in it can actually significantly improve productivity and efficiency.
well, and then to their credit, IT did try to give me a new laptop after the last election. I said, no, I'll use the old one. So getting through a pandemic with a 7.5-year-old MacBook Air, but it's holding up so far. So I'm trying to do my part to keep this number down, is what I'm saying. The other question I had, so I'm glad you're following up on that, because that one was a bit of an exception for me. The other one, just get back to it. Right, was the facility management and maintenance one. This one looked really good, but what I was having trouble tracking, and with a lot of these things where there are 2 or 3 variables, the story with this one that seemed to be changing was that, trying to find the exact wording, the cost per person seemed to be changing, even if the square foot was constant. Hold on, let me.
It's page 22, I believe.
Yeah, page 22. So the costs have increased by 13%, which was impacted, right, by the increase in provincial minimum wage. So what had driven the cost up was minimum wage on the one hand, and then I wondered whether our living wage requirements for our contractors would have also been affecting that on the contracted side.
Offhand, I'm not sure. It sounds reasonable that that would be the case, yes. And that's the type of contextual information that's really important as well.
Well, yeah, because I don't think that's a bad thing. We've said we don't want to be an exploitative employer. And so when a variable like that is introduced, a policy change that torques your benchmark.
Yeah, and this, obviously there's going to be collective bargaining agreements that you have to follow in this case as well. So you're right. The city of Edmonton does want to be seen as making sure that they are providing everyone a living wage. So that could be a factor here.
Well, and then you hope that there are some offsets in terms of retention, productivity, a whole bunch of other things if you're treating people with respect with their compensation, whether they're contractors or whether they're city staff. So.
And the other factor is if you go to the next page, relative, benchmarking, the city is still relatively good when you look at it, $1.28 to $1.37. So.
Well, and that was that had jumped off the page of me too, because you look at the thing going up and it looks like we've got a problem, but then you check against the benchmark and perhaps we're coming up to the benchmark, and if we were way over, then you'd want to reevaluate. But obviously we're getting good productivity for what we are paying the people we're asking to do this work relative to the marketplace. So yeah, those were the only two that I had specific questions about, but it was very interesting to read these and reassuring to see the recommendations around looking for more benchmarking, because I think that's really helpful for us. So I'll move receipt of information. It looks like no one else has got questions at this point. So, but I'll check to see if there are any more questions before we consider this. Not seeing any, then let's vote on receipt of information.
We have all the votes.
Display the vote. Carried. All right. Are there any notices of motion today? Seeing none, then our work is complete for today. Thank you very much.